Jennifers, 16 Jens, 10 Jennies, and then there was her.
All right, it's Kyle Meredith for the weekly feed here in the world-famous, legendary Electric Lady Studios. This is one of probably the most awesome moments. I mean, you guys are good. You guys are cool, but we're an Electric Lady here. So.
It's true.
It's Mike Doughty and Joseph Arthur together at last. Yeah, well, you're two of the most unique songwriters I think that are out there today for different reasons, but also for plenty of similar reasons. The styles you do, the way you present yourselves, the type of songs you do, and the constant changing. Mike, I heard you say many times you're a connoisseur of words.
Am I a connoisseur of words? I guess. I just like them.
Yeah, but you both do that. I mean, you've both got this almost stream of consciousness thing, I think, that goes along.
Sure.
Whether it's, Joe, because, there are lots of songs always coming at us. I feel like, maybe the edit button isn't even there because you have to get so many lyrics out so quickly.
I don't know how to respond to that.
I don't know that that's a question either.
I think writing's kind of sort of compulsive behavior. And it's sort of, I think there's an addictive element to it as well. Like if you have that tendency and you can sort of veer it towards creativity, you can sort of take the forces that could be sort of negative and turn them into something, at least I think, are positive.
Sure,
some people who hate my stuff might disagree.
When you guys are writing all this stuff, though, when you're both, obviously on board with that, you are prolific. Some artists are they hate that word and everything, but you're on it. But when you're doing it that often, though, is it hard to switch up styles because you find the little differences? Joe, you can do a record that is a slow acoustic record, and then your very next record is Redemption. It's a double album and more electronic. In the same way, it's like when you're putting out that much content that often, how hard is it to switch styles? How hard is it, or easy is it, to not do the same thing that you just did because it was written pretty much in the same breath?
I guess I'm not really thinking about it. I mean, I'm just doing it. And I am a guy that likes to sort of set parameters. Like, okay, this is going to be just recorded with these musicians or just in this environment. Mm-hmm. And that's just helpful when you're kind of looking at the blank page.
Right.
But other than that, I'm just doing it. I'm trying not to think about it. I mean, if you stop and think about it, you're like trouble.
Yeah, you're lost at that point. Once you engage your mind too much. But I also think there's kind of like misinformation about like nowadays about being sort of prolific and sort of putting lots of records out and then quality control going down, because I think like the most important artists of all time did their most important work in stages when like the Beatles is like 5 years, the whole thing.
Right.
I mean, like the Rolling Stones, they're like, best 4 records and they're on tour and they're in between tour stops recording and everything like that. So I think there's this kind of thought now that when people take a lot of time, it's better, and I'm not so sure that's true because I don't know. I mean,
I tend to agree with that, but I think like if everything you put out is not your favorite record,
right?
Like as long as you're making your favorite records,
yeah,
you can put them out as
yeah.
There's no, I mean, there are people that are just kind of like blah 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 on the market, blah 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 on the market.
Yeah.
But I feel like you're not stopping and looking at it.
Yeah.
And like if you're not loving everything, and you're not totally like I'm sort of the head that like I'm a conduit. To be a total hippie, but
well,
like
we are in Hendrix's place.
We are in Hendrix's place. But it's like it's just kind of like it's like, oh, I love this thing. What is this? This is so great. Right. And if
but doesn't that change? Like, because like you start out, I love this thing. This is the greatest. By the time it's at mastering, you want to like hang yourself.
Well, yeah. I mean, 2 months later, you hate it. But as long as you're like loving it when at some critical juncture.
Yeah, for most of the time. Yeah.
Like my prolificness is really begun to bum me out. Like everybody's like, Jesus, that guy with another album. Yeah. I mean, even people that like, this thing happens where I think people are just like, oh, I got plenty. Oh, that Mike Doughty guy. I got plenty. I'm stocked up on my Mike Doughty. I got my 3 Soul Coffin albums, my 4 solo albums. great, that's great. And like the stuff I read about myself is like, all right, it's that guy. Right.
But that's fine, because like even like somebody like I love Bob Dylan, I love Neil Young. I don't think I have all their records, and I'm like, and I love, and so like when people like my music, if they don't have all my records, I'm kind of like I revert to that. I'm like, that's cool, I understand that. There's no way you could, if you had all my records, you'd be kind of nutty.
Right.
Is it 35, 40?
You know, I don't even have all my records.
Right. You've both been kind of knocking on this door and everything. Mike, you did write the Book of Drugs. Joe, you've had your ins and outs on your own. How hard is it now, especially now, to still be a musician and to try to keep up with the sobriety and everything else and to the straight and narrow? Because you're always around it. I mean, this stuff is always tempting, though, right?
No. It really...
Like, once you're out, like...
Once you don't need the crutch, it's better than with the crutch.
Yeah.
So, you know, just being able to do stuff, and I'm much more prolific, and, you know, I feel like there's a lot more depth to what I'm doing and satisfaction, and, like, you know, I've gotten a lot of the ego parts, sorry about that, out of the way, and just sort of being, like, sort of the spiritual mindset of, like, you know, whatever it is coming through me. So it's like... Plus, you know, like, who wants to hang out with people when you're getting wasted? You want to be alone in a hotel room, man.
Yeah, it's painful, man. If you do it like an addict does it, it's a full-time job, and it's a painful job, and it's, you know, it's brutal, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, the way I do it is, it's just not an option. That's like all the steps simplified for me. It's like, none of it's an option. Like, I'm not going to go run into that wall at full speed with my head. I'm not going to drink a beer or anything. It's like, you know, that's how I do it. Yeah. And as soon as it becomes an option, which, you know, I started getting sober when I was 20. I was like really early with it because I was a musician really young, and so I kind of like went heavy into it pretty early. And it's, you know, and I don't even have all that much consecutive time right now because I went back out and then came back to my senses. But once it becomes an option, it's forget it. I'll lose that battle. If I'm like in a bar thinking, I wonder if I should drink or not, or, oh, you're offering me a joint, should I, shouldn't I?
Yeah.
I will. But like the way it is for me right now is there's no way.
Yeah.
I'm just not, and I don't want to or miss it at all. It's like everything he said, man. It's so much better. We just did a whole tour and everybody was sober, and there isn't this like weird ritual you do.
You're like, it's like the creation.
Yeah, like that. Like it's this whole thing, man. It's really exhausting, and then, you know, money and all that stuff, and it's like when you just like kind of have a lot, like sort of a laissez-faire attitude about going on stage, I think it's easier to let go and be a conduit, like, as you say, you know, rather than creating all this like magical ritual thing. It's unnecessary because the whole thing is magical ritual anyway. It's already intrinsic to it, so you don't really need to like fake that in any way.
You know, there was a I don't remember what the movie was, but it was about a sex addict, right? And there is such a thing. Like, if you're like having sex with the ugliest people you can imagine just 5 times a day, and like going down into like a week-long porn hole, which happens to people, like it's addiction. And somebody reviewed this movie, and it was about this guy who's just like totally in the depths of it. And the review was like, but he's not having any fun. Why don't they show him having fun? It's like, it's fun for you. Like you do drugs and it's fun. It's not like, it doesn't, to me, it just becomes super its own thing. That's not like, I'm not partying. I'm like going, get it in there.
Yeah. It's a full time. Yeah. But when you wrote that book, like how did you know what to leave in and what to take out, and what were the what was the fallout of that book? Because your book was really open.
I wanted to write the thing and not be concerned with, you know, like I wanted like art to be the master in this, not like relationships. And on some levels, that's been like I just reconnected with this dude that I hadn't seen in a lot of years. And, you know, we'd been hanging out. It was really great, and he's in a great place in his life. And then just the other day at dinner, he was like, "So what about this thing you said about me?" Oh, that.
Right.
I mean, it's true.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody that doesn't know him would recognize him. But really, it was like I just, I'd read a book by another guy that I kind of know who, like, it was a good book, but there were a lot of times when he like glossed stuff over, left stuff up. And it's like, that's, I know that story, and there's so much interesting stuff in that. So, basically did my best to be merciless on myself and tell all of my stories about me being an asshole. And then I went to people and just acknowledged to them, like, I know your story's different. Like, I know that, people remember stuff so differently, it's trippy.
Right.
So, and I, in the front of the book, I'm like, listen, like, I've talked to a lot of people and they have different stories.
Right.
And some are better and some are worse.
Yeah,
but
you began it like
that.
Yeah.
I have to mention that happens with both of you guys, though, because for as long as you've been writing, and you both write personal, and even if you don't, your personal lives are going to get into your songs when you're writing.
Right.
I mean, and trying to have relationships, trying to get with girls at one point, have you had those points, though, where the girls are like, I don't know if I want to get with this because I'm going to end up in a song, and not the good way, because you put it out there, and then you have to reap what you sow later, right? I mean, you have to deal with how people have relationships towards you.
I'm in this really great, rewarding, awesome relationship right now, and it's been a long time since I've been in one. And it started about the time the book came out. So, like, we're on date 3, and then she's reading the book.
Right.
Wow.
So, she's like, she's kind of, she knows about the thing, and, she's an honest person, and,
She can hang at that point. That's
yeah, I mean,
right.
she knows about wreckage, and it's kind of like, if you want to get real, it's sort of easier to be like, here's everything.
Right. Yeah.
Give me a call on Wednesday.
But if everybody actually had that calling card,
Yes.
I was dating a girl once or a while back, and we were getting into an argument, and she said, I should have known not to date you by reading your Wikipedia page.
That's the most dangerous one.
And I said, what is my, because, like, I'm not, I'm definitely, a narcissist, but I'm not a self-Googler, and I was really kind of ignorant as to, like, what my Wikipedia page, because I'd seen it years ago, but I hadn't read it in a million years. And I was like, what's my Wikipedia page say? Like, and she was like, oh, it talks about how your addiction. I'm like, wow. And that was a weird moment where, like, I was like, that, because like you asked right before, is it cool to bring that up? And I'm like, yeah, it's fine. I don't really have a shame or a stigma about it. I just think it is what it is. Lots of people have addiction, and I think it's a disease that you're born with or you're not. So that's my feeling about it. But at that moment, I was a bit like, if I felt exposed, because I was like, wow, that's kind of weird. I wonder if I can change my Wikipedia page.
And you can.
Well, one point I took off my birthday. That's kind of shameful to admit, but like it was up again in an hour, so I gave up.
I think we all owe it to the world to have our real birthdays, like, everywhere.
71.
70. I mean, so you win, basically. And you're like 84.
I'm 81.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm 81.
Really?
I'm 81.
The year I graduated junior high. I don't know.
Well,
I was 10, I guess.
It's you were advanced.
I was yeah.
Smart kid.
I think if you hide that stuff, you are doing a disservice to the next generation.
Yeah.
And it's also like, there's all this stupid stuff about aging in the culture.
Yeah.
And I hate it when people say, like, I'm still young at heart. It's like, no, you're not. You're just you.
Well, I loved what you wrote with that Left Sets retweeted or whatever the thing we should talk about that. The older generation. And also you wrote in that, like, let's not be afraid of the term middle-aged.
Right.
That was cool.
Oh, thanks.
Like, yes.
It's kind of like...
I have that here, too.
So
we were talking before you came.
Basically, I mean, just on a business level, there isn't an industry on the planet that would tolerate losing 90% of the people that pay money when they turn 32.
Right.
But this happens and nobody tries to figure it out.
Yeah.
And I think the reason is mostly vanity.
Yeah.
It's because, like, if you're in music on a record company level,
Uh-huh.
you're just like, I'm young and I'm hip and I'm super young and I'm hip. And it's kind of like, like, why don't we live in a world that acknowledges babysitters?
Yeah.
I don't need one. But everybody who comes to my shows is like, it's not brain surgery. It's like, start the show at 7:30.
Yeah.
Know when it ends. Don't have an opening act.
Or give the opening act 3 songs. I would. Alter,
I think that's a good idea.
I would alter that to 4 songs. But I do like your idea. Like, because even I'm often an opening act, and I think as an opening act, it would be better to just go out there for 4 songs or something.
Yeah.
Like
That used to be the
because it's like
standard.
you got to play a whole set.
Otis Redding, Monterey.
Yeah.
We got there. It was like 4 songs.
Yeah,
Right? It's like,
exactly.
that's the life-changing moment.
and
or
that's
something
enough.
Like that.
Like for
Yeah.
Well, I've been doing comedy shows, and it is amazing. Of course, those guys have the benefit of like, I got 5 shows.
You're
tonight.
doing stand-up comedy.
No. I'm just doing like musical guests on comedy shows.
Oh, okay.
And it's so great. First of all, because people actually want to listen to music, as opposed to like going to the bar. They're like, let's listen. But it's like everybody goes up there and they're an assassin. They do their 10 minutes and
Yeah.
and it's like it's the best way to do it. And personally, I'd rather play for 3 hours. So there's a level on which.
You could bring it back the whole 2 shows scenario. You're talking about starting at 7:30 or something
Right.
like that. I mean, back in the day, that is what you did. If you go for the old bootlegs in the '60s or whatever, it's like, what do you want? Do you want the early show or the late show bootleg?
Right.
Like, and then you're playing to 2 different crowds, and you still get to play the long set.
Yeah, I mean, you remember you got to talk a club owner into doing that.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking hypothetical anyway. This is.
I hope we're not talking hypothetical. I hope we're talking like get it done, man. Because like we don't live in a world where if you're 40 years old, you're like, I heard that song. I want to go see this guy play. Maybe he's good. Because it's not like going to a movie. Like the club is super cagey about when you're actually going on.
It's really true. Those are good points.
If drunks start talking, nobody in the club. I was doing this benefit the other night.
The performer has to shut them up, which can get awkward.
Yeah, which is shit. It's like I was doing this benefit. It was all like people reading.
Yeah.
And there's people talking in the back. I'm looking at the bartender, and he's just standing there. It's
Right.
like nobody thinks of like there's like 100 people listening and 5 jerks talking.
Right.
Kick them out, man. Like
Yeah.
what the hell?